Good afternoon, everyone. Please settle into your seats and we will start momentarily. Thank you. Hair looks a little bit. Good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome to this session on innovating pathways to justice and effective remedy, a deep dive into certification, verification, and assurance systems. For over a decade now, the Working Group on Business and Human Rights has provided guidance to states and to businesses on implementing various aspects of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. Yet one area still requiring focused attention is certification, verification, and audit systems. In a sense, these systems are not neutral technical tools, if I may say so, but they can shape whether human rights are upheld or undermined. Recent consultations that the working group has been a part of, including the global convening in Indonesia, made clear that these systems must go beyond compliance checklists. And here, Indigenous representatives that have participated in these consultations have shared how certified projects can often overlook human rights due diligence and exclude Indigenous peoples from governance and monitoring. In this regard, certification, verification, and audits cannot substitute proper human rights due diligence, but they can certainly complement them. And at the same time, it is important to bear in mind that businesses, too, cannot outsource their human rights responsibilities in that way. In view of this, I am very pleased to be joined here today with an esteemed panel of speakers. To discuss these issues and more, I'm very pleased to introduce each of these speakers to you. So starting on my left, I have with me Paola Lancheros, who is part of the BHR team of the Presidential Council for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law of Colombia. Just to provide you some additional background, the Presidential Council for Human Rights of Colombia seeks to strengthen the coordination of actions among state institutions to ensure the respect and promotion of human rights, and it also leads the national business and human rights agenda. On my right is Salem Jones, who is the Director of System Integrity of the Forest Stewardship Council. FSC, as it's also very well known for, is a multi-stakeholder platform governed by three chambers: environment, social, and economic, and unites individuals, businesses, governments, and NGOs under a common goal of protecting the world's forests and forest communities, as well as tackling today's deforestation, climate, and biodiversity challenges. Next to Salem, we have Pierre Petit de Pasquale, who is the Standards Director of the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, also known as IRMA. IRMA is an international multi-partite organization that brings together the mining industry and their customers, finance, NGOs, affected communities, Indigenous rights holders, and organized labor, all with equal voting rights and veto powers. And then next to Pierre, we have Tyler Gillard, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of the Responsible Business Alliance. The Alliance, or the RBA, is an industry coalition dedicated to responsible business conduct in global supply chains. Members, suppliers, and stakeholders collaborate to improve working and environmental conditions and business performance through leading standards and practices. And then let me return now to my left-hand side. I have with me Andiko, who is a member of the Minangkabau Indigenous community in West Sumatra, Indonesia. He is a sustainability and human rights lawyer who works with Indigenous peoples and agrarian and natural resource management stakeholders to achieve legal justice and certainty for affected communities. And I will also add that next to Andiko, we have a special guest who I only found out was here with us in Geneva last night, Hoi Mai, who I will share with you her story later towards the conclusion of the session. But just to introduce myself as well, my name is Pishamon Ilpantong. I'm currently the chairperson and Asia Pacific member on the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights. Now, with all of the introductions done, let me begin by posing a question to all of our speakers today, which is, in relation to the different organizations that you represent, What is your experience with ensuring access to remedy in relation to certification and verification systems, and what opportunities or limitations do you see them providing? With that, let me turn first to you, Paula, to share your thoughts. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pichaman, and good afternoon, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here sharing this panel with these colleagues. I'm really grateful with the organizers and also with the working group for the invitation to join this panel. Before we begin, I'd like to confess something, and it's while all my fellow panels work brilliantly every day in English, I will be stick to one of my superpowers, which is speaking in Spanish. So I will be answering in Spanish to make sure I can share my thoughts clearly. And also, who knows, to keep you all a bit more alert. Cambiando entonces ahora a español, desde la experiencia de Colombia, debo decir que en materia de acceso a remedio, nuestra experiencia ha sido más bien ambivalente, específicamente tratándose de sistemas de certificación y verificación. En Colombia, pues hay que decirlo primero, operan múltiples mecanismos de certificación y verificación internacionales, específicamente en algunos sectores como el sector extractivo y la agroindustria y sus cadenas de suministro. Por ejemplo, en el sector minero sabemos que las empresas afiliadas a la Asociación Colombiana de Minería, pues un gremio, apuntan a adoptar cada vez más pues estándares como mecanismos como Towards Sustainable Mining, Coopermark, el ICMM y también el Consejo Mundial de Oro. De hecho, sabemos que apuntan ahora a tener un estándar pues unificado, un estándar global de minería y con el fin de tener un poco más de alcance. Por supuesto, también se identifican otras iniciativas como IRMA, Better Coal y otros. En el caso de la agroindustria también y sus cadenas agrícolas, Colombia es uno de los países con mayor número de hectáreas certificadas de palma por el RCPO. Y hay iniciativas también como Rainforest Alliance y Fairtrade presentes en sectores como café, banano, cacao, bueno, otros sectores, digamos, agrícolas que no me voy a extender en este momento, pero estos, digamos, ejemplos para decir que en estos sectores y en otros, pues, están presentes estas iniciativas y, por supuesto, que han tenido una incidencia en el desarrollo de las prácticas de estos sectores. En términos de oportunidades, entonces, pues, digamos que estas iniciativas han generado incentivos, por supuesto, para que cada vez las empresas se involucren más y se interesen más en adoptar prácticas alineadas con estándares, sobre todo de sostenibilidad, y algunas de ellas, pues por supuesto hay que decir que no todas, pero cada vez más han integrado estándares relacionados con el respeto para los derechos humanos y también pues apuntando al acceso a reparación, a remedio. Algunos inclusive pues como RCPO e IRMA cuentan con mecanismos propios de reclamación de quejas y reclamos y esto en muchos casos ha permitido visibilizar de alguna manera riesgos o abrir canales de diálogo con las mismas comunidades. También al estar, digamos, interconectados con mercados internacionales, por supuesto que ejercen cierta influencia y cierto incentivo a nivel reputacional y comercial, y eso de alguna manera puede empezar a complementar la acción estatal en términos de acceso a la justicia, ¿no? Y hablando un poco de ese mecanismo o ese ecosistema de reparación o de remedio. Sin embargo, pues es importante destacar algunas limitaciones importantes pues que tienen todavía estos sistemas de verificación y certificación para acceder o para contribuir efectivamente a la reparación en derechos humanos en los casos en donde se generan afectaciones. En la experiencia de la Consejería Presidencial para los Derechos Humanos de Colombia, hay que decir que durante el 2024 y 2025 nos dedicamos a realizar el levantamiento del primer estudio de línea base en la materia. Bueno, para ello se priorizaron 6 ejes sobre los que se enfocó este análisis y digamos que no es un tema menor porque uno de esos ejes está enfocado justamente en el análisis de mecanismos de acceso a justicia y a reparación. Y en relación con ello, digamos que hubo 3 hallazgos contundentes relacionados con los mecanismos de certificación y verificación. Lo primero que hay que decir es que de los 8 talleres territoriales que se hicieron en el país para realizar este estudio de digamos, información primaria con distintos actores, incluyendo empresas, actores de la sociedad civil y, por supuesto, autoridades territoriales, solo en 2 de estos talleres, en Bogotá y en Medellín, se hizo una referencia explícita al conocimiento y seguimiento de mecanismos de certificación y verificación. Además, quienes lo mencionaron pues fueron grandes empresas únicamente, lo que pues de antemano deja ver ya un reto de generar una mayor incidencia hacia las cadenas de suministro, especialmente hacia pequeñas y medianas empresas. Y también, por supuesto, de generar una mayor incidencia en los territorios, porque digamos que en los espacios, por ejemplo, con sociedad civil, este no fue un tema que surgió, entonces los titulares de derechos, comunidades, pues todavía desconocen mucho de estos mecanismos y sobre todo de su alcance o el alcance que puedan llegar a tener en acceso efectivo a reparación. Esto no significa pues, que las demás empresas que hayan participado no los conozcan o no los identifiquen, pues que también es valioso reconocer que ese ejercicio de compartir buenas prácticas y lecciones aprendidas, pues hasta ahora ha sido lo que ha impulsado en muchos sectores, pues justamente la mejoría de esa conducta empresarial, ¿no? Y ha permitido de alguna manera avanzar hacia conocer cada vez más los estándares que ahora tienen como o estamos buscando que tengan ese enfoque de derechos humanos de manera transversal. Sin embargo, pues esa muestra, digamos, del sector privado todavía es reducida en relación con la reparación y su relación con la reparación efectiva de alguna manera todavía no es tan clara, no es tan directa ni tan contundente. Pues digamos, no hay evidencia o no hay mucha evidencia sobre casos en donde se haya habido una reparación efectiva en estos casos a través de estos mecanismos, sin querer decir que no pueden llegar a conducir a ello, es decir, son mecanismos que de alguna manera acercan un poco a tener estas conversaciones que a veces pueden ser complejas, difíciles, pero sí deja ver que estos mecanismos o no se conocen lo suficiente o no generan todavía la confianza necesaria en los territorios para utilizarlos. En últimas, puede ser que hay dos razones por las que las empresas cada vez más están acercándose a estos mecanismos a nivel sectorial, y es ya sea porque la casa matriz los implementa, las empresas como parte de una cadena de valor, o porque es un requisito que está siendo cada vez más exigido a través de leyes, desarrollos normativos o inclusive para acceder a bolsas de valores y demás. Digamos un poco para ir cerrando y complementando, creo que la experiencia colombiana a partir sobre todo de este estudio, pero pues también de muchos de los casos en los que también la sociedad civil ha estado muy vinculada en realizar pues o en acceder a la justicia a través de distintos mecanismos, es que estos sistemas de verificación y certificación pueden ser complementarios para la prevención e identificación temprana de riesgos, aún tienen grandes retos para constituir canales efectivos y suficientes para el acceso a reparación y sobre todo una reparación efectiva que apunte a la garantía del acceso a la justicia como un derecho humano, ¿no? Y creo que esos retos pueden estar muy alineados o orientados a alcanzar un mayor grado de independencia, a vincular cada vez más la participación de titulares de derechos en los territorios, a que tengan una lectura de contexto, un enfoque territorial y, por supuesto, articularse cada vez más con los estándares y obligaciones a nivel estatal y una cooperación, digamos, o coordinación también con los mismos estados, en donde, por supuesto, como estados también tenemos una pues, responsabilidad de integrar cada vez más estos mecanismos a su ecosistema y pues facilitar inclusive también su difusión.
Thank you very much for those comprehensive insights, Paula, from Colombia, and for really highlighting that there are real opportunities here in terms of building complementarity with these systems, but equally that there are clear gaps when it comes to ensuring access to remedy. Now, let me turn to you, Tyler, given that the RBA is an industry coalition. What is your perspective in relation to opportunities and limitations posed by these systems?
Thank you very much, Pichimon, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I had the pleasure of participating over years at even the inaugural forum, and it's really grown, and I would really just, as an aside, really encourage you all to contribute to and volunteer your time or contribute to keeping this forum running. So first of all, I do want to start off, and you know, not to be nitpicky or semantic, but just to note that we often use, I think in this community, verification, auditing, certification, conformity assessments, assurance, interchangeably. But if you talk to an auditor or an inspector, they will go at great lengths to explain to you in great detail how all of these concepts are different. Now, we probably see more similarity than difference, but when you're in it, you notice some serious differences. What they would say, and what we certainly agree with, is we need more rigor in how these practices and universe are understood within this community. I think it's really incumbent on all of us to apply more rigor in how we understand what certification and auditing means, what is good practice. And somewhat as an aside, the RBA, we support a robust CSDDD that's aligned with the UNGPs, and as part of our policy position, we also advocated for governments to come up with quality criteria to regulate this space. Because all auditing, as I'm sure also my colleague next to me will say, are not created equal. They lead to vastly different outcomes depending on how it's being done. Just to start off at the RBA, the Responsible Business Alliance, we support due diligence in global supply chains. That includes by overseeing third-party assessments, by accrediting those assessors and overseeing the standard. But it also includes a lot of other aspects of due diligence, providing data, doing training and capacity building, and most importantly, facilitating collective action to actually address root causes of harm and provide a remedy. We do not certify, so that's one point, just to be very clear, we do not certify companies or sites. We conduct assessments that, by their nature, are backward-looking and a single point in time, and therefore limited. Just to get a little bit into the difference from our perspective at least, certification often suggests a sort of formal recognition that a certain product or site fully meets a certain outcome. They're outcome-oriented with a sort of pass-fail. An audit is more focused on a process, giving you a kind of sense of a score on management systems, how issues are being managed in a factory and a site. And I would say for human rights, unlike environmental matters with GHG or hazardous chemicals, it's very difficult with human rights to come up with some sort of outcome-oriented guarantee. So no audit, in our view, can provide you a guarantee on the absence of risk at all. What they can tell you is at that point in time, if they are done well, risks were being identified and managed and addressed. That due diligence systems, management systems are in place. But as I said, both verification and auditing are backward-looking, and they provide a snapshot in time. And even if done well, they may not address and identify all the risks. We see auditing, therefore, simply as one data point, one piece of information that must be accompanied by monitoring, effective engagement with stakeholders, partnerships to address risks. And at the same time, as I started, not even all auditing is the same. If you don't have auditing that engages workers and communities effectively, doesn't have effective oversight, quality control, and accreditation processes, you're going to lead to vastly different results, as we know today. Often, I see a sort of false dichotomy being presented. Use social audits or don't use them at all. Or actually, I think it is incumbent on all of us to sort of understand what good looks like and provide some quality criteria so that we can build on what exists to ensure respect for human rights in global supply chains. Because don't get me wrong, there's a lot of skills in infrastructure amongst the auditing community that can very help us achieve and meet our goals, that we need to be building on and leveraging in order to scale what we're trying to achieve. On the relationship on access to remedy, I would say verification and auditing does play a role in access to remedy, and I'll go through it, but it's not its primary function. So I think we need to start with that understanding. The primary function of auditing and assessments is to identify risks, again, looking at management systems, and then support corrective action planning, which is largely about fixing management systems, mitigation and prevention of risks. So I want to say this clearly, corrective action plans do not equal a remedy. They are not the same thing. And largely auditing is about looking at gaps in a management system at a factory and working with that site to fix those gaps. They're not necessarily aimed at looking at remediation per se, but they have a role. And I see 4 roles, at least in what we do, and I'll give you some examples. So one of the roles is they help to identify issues in need of remediation. So for example, they can identify if wages have not been paid, if migrants have paid recruitment fees, and these are all issues we find every day, or environmental terms if ecosystems have been damaged and they need repair. So for example, last year the RBA did over 2,200 audits, and 15% of our audits found working hour issues. 10% of our audits found issues around emergency preparedness, and 7% of our audits found issues around control processes, particularly how management, manages its chemicals and exposures. Wages and benefits were around 6% of everything we found. So that's the first way. They can help to identify some of those issues that might need remediation later on. The second is that they can evaluate whether local access to remedy grievance mechanisms are in place at the site. So whether sites have management systems in place that provide an operational level grievance mechanism that's accessible, transparent, rights compatible, and responsive. In our audits last year, 15% of our audits found the sites had issues around grievance mechanisms that were not really effectively. And out of that, 65% of them were major issues. The third way that audits can support access to remedy is actually to help evaluate or actually calculate the extent of remediation that should occur. So one of the things that we do, other than in a factory audit, is we also oversee third-party fee investigations. Many of you may know that migrant workers sometimes, and in many cases often, pay a fee for recruitment. That fee creates a huge risk of debt bondage that they cannot get out of and becomes a situation of forced labor, particularly when it's accompanied with other working conditions, inhumane treatment, limits on access, and travel. We have oversee third-party fee investigations, and that sends a third party in to say how much fees need to be reimbursed at this factory if they've been identified, how many workers are in scope, where did they come from, and to give a number so that number can be reimbursed back to workers. And just to let you know that our work, and probably the most concrete impact on remedy we've had in the last 2 years, is we've helped to reimburse over $50 million back to workers' pockets through issues that we have identified and calculated. And then I think the fourth way that this universe supports remediation is to help assess whether that remediation took place as was described. So when we come up with a fee investigation, we determine, this factory needs to pay $1 million back to workers who paid fees. We require that a closeout audit happens to ensure that reimbursement took place. So audits play a role in remediation, but it's not their core goal. The hard work is actually the collective action following up on those findings to deliver the remedy. So that example I gave where we've helped to return $50 million back to workers, yes, they've been identified in the audit, but the audit didn't play a critical role in delivering that remedy. It was the collective action by the staff and working with the buyers and the workplace to deliver that remedy. So it would be the ways that we work on access to remedy. There's a lot of challenges, of course, that we struggle with in even meeting that role in our own timeliness and our own effectiveness. The full ambit of remedy is maybe more than just a recruitment fee. Those are difficult to get to. The other elements of remedy, there's also many times disagreements over a lot of specific things of what the remedy should look like. But and also our ability to engage those rights holders is always challenging, of course. But that, I think, sets the scene.
Thank you very much, Tyler. And with that, let me turn now to you, Salem. In relation to FSC's experience, Tyler just gave us the ABCs of how certification, verification, auditing, assurance systems are all different and all that, but what are your views in terms of the limitations and opportunities in relation to access to remedy?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tyler, for that wonderful overview of certification systems and the role of auditing. I think that was really helpful to set the ground to understand FSC as a certification system. But what Tyler has just explained about remedial actions within the certification system, that is not what I'm going to talk about today at all. In fact, what I'm going to talk about today is FSC's innovative solution, which is through a standard approach to create what we call the FSC Remedy Framework, which is a process which is outcome-oriented to provide and drive remedy in landscapes to restore forest areas which have been degraded and to provide restitution for people who have been harmed in forestry operations over the last 30 years. This is not about addressing nonconformities in a certification system. It's about changing landscapes it's about restitution, and it's about reforesting degraded forest landscapes. So that's what I'm going to talk about with you today. I wanted to say a few words about FSC, and maybe to ask some of you to pull out your train tickets or a receipt that you've just received from the grocery store, and look on the back and see if you find the FSC label there. Would anyone like to engage in that exercise? You might run into the FSC label on cardboard packaging. You might run into the FSC label on your wooden hairbrush. You might run into the FSC label on your cereal box in the morning. It's there on the back of this receipt. Thank you, Tyler.
We didn't plan this.
Yeah, no, we didn't plan this, but it's a good example. The FSC label you will find in many different places on all sorts of timber and forest products across the globe. FSC is the leading forest certification system for forest and timber products. We've been around for 30 years, and we figured out the certification side of things. But in our 30 years of operating as a standard-setting organization, we've also realized that, outside of certification and outside of the work that we're doing to drive responsible forest management practices on the ground, there's a lot of bad stuff happening. There are human rights abuses happening. There's degradation of hotspot biodiverse regions. There's massive conversion of natural forests to plantations and other land use. And FSC said, we can actually use our system to do something about this. And our membership said, actually, this is going to be really hard. We might be totally crazy, but we've got to try it. We have to try to use the certification system to try to bring change to these landscapes. And that's where the FSC remedy framework came from. It was born out of a 10-year process with our membership in order to try to change the face of degraded forest landscapes. We are a voluntary certification system. We're a market-based system, which means that that label on the back of the receipt shows that the pulp used to print on that paper, or to make that paper, came from a sustainable, sourced, harvested, managed forest, all the way from the standing timber through all of the production sites, through to the printer that actually printed that receipt. This market-based mechanism is how we are creating incentives for businesses to engage in remedy and try to drive change through these degraded landscapes. What does that look like? Companies which have been involved in human rights violations, companies that have been involved in massive conversion of forest landscapes, these companies are not eligible for FSC certification. But because international markets, because national trade laws, because of the coming EUDR, there are regulations about the trade of timber and timber products into countries that say, we're not interested in importing wood into our country that doesn't meet some really basic laws or really basic rules. And because of that, organizations, businesses, they look at the FSC label and they say, this is maybe an opportunity for us to meet these legality compliance requirements, but to also differentiate our product on the market from others that we're competing with. So that FSC label is a market-based approach for FSC to drive sustainable forest management, but to also drive this FSC remedy framework. I think some of the things that we would like to bring to this discussion and some of the limitations that we're seeing in implementing the remedy framework is around government engagement and capacity building. In the implementation of this standard over the last 2 years, we've seen that we really need to work with government partners. Because in many countries, forest areas are actually owned by governments, and the businesses only have concession licenses to operate in those areas. If there are land tenure conflicts with rights holders, in order to go through a process to excise those areas, we need to work with governments to find solutions to expedite those processes of excision of community lands from forest concession areas. We're also looking at capacity building. Capacity building is emerging as a really important area for FSC, but also for other certification systems that are operating in similar landscapes. We have forest plantations which are operating next to oil palm plantations, which are operating next to sugar plantations, which are operating next to natural forest areas. Because of the mosaic composition of landscapes, FSC does not exist within a vacuum. When we talk about remedy, we talk about restoring landscapes, we don't act alone. We have to act in community with other certification systems, with other kinds of partnerships. And through this capacity building initiative that we are starting, we're wanting to really create a kind of engine, a motor around driving information, driving capacity building and knowledge sharing in a rights-centered focus to support Indigenous peoples and rights holders to engage in remedy, and in order to receive an equal power balance in access to remedy as we move through the remedy framework with these communities. If you're interested in working with FSC, or if you have something that you think FSC could learn from, please approach me, approach my colleague Michelle in the front. We're very happy to talk with you, and we're very happy to collaborate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those insights, Salem. And you had a bit of applause there as well. Thank you for that. Now let me turn to Pierre. We've heard it from Tyler, we've heard from Salem about the limitations and the opportunities for their respective organizations. What about Irma?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the organizers of this session for inviting Irma to contribute. It's a real honor. I want to acknowledge FSC. We've also learned a lot from FSC throughout the years. And first of all, I want to reiterate that no matter how robust, rigorous, and inclusive voluntary systems are, they cannot and they should not replace the role of governments and their primary duty to promote and enforce the rule of law, to protect human lives, animals, biodiversity, and the planet. When it comes to Irma and access to remedy, we've heard already several things from Tyler and Salem that I think makes a lot of sense. I think I can elaborate on maybe 3 features. First, it's the use of our standard by mining companies all around the world. So the IRMA standard is a multipartite consensus on best practice for responsible mining. And among the 420 plus requirements that we have, it includes detailed chapters on human rights due diligence and grievance mechanisms and access to remedy, basically transposing the guiding principles into practical steps that can be implemented by mining companies and that can be evaluated by independent audit firms. So to your point, Tyler, this is a verification system, so, but not only to identify risk, I'd say, also to drive longer-term continuous improvement, but it's not a pass-fail certification. And the full audit reports are always made publicly available. This process has really helped raise awareness and build the capacity of mining companies, which are often lacking, as Paula mentioned. And so audited sites must demonstrate the extent to which they enable and provide effective access to remedy. And when gaps are identified, they need to put in place corrective measures, either as part of the finalization of the audit or later on for a subsequent audit. And our audit reports have shown some practical examples of sites taking measures, I'd say, not only to improve their systems, but also to remedy harm. And that's public information. That's in our report, so I can share some examples. That includes agreeing on compensation for impacts related to displacement and resettlement, or for impacts due to blasting and vibration. Mitigating impacts on access to housing due to workers' influx, ensuring that contractors' grievances are treated seriously, offering support to workers who experience gender-based violence, or redressing unfair labor practices. And so although those remedy measures cannot be attributed to IRMA's ongoing verification process alone, it often drives or accelerates these measures. I don't want to paint a too rosy picture, so unfortunately there are also sites where auditors have evidence, and I think similar to the point you raised, Tyler, that grievance mechanisms and remedy procedures are not working. They take too long, they're deemed not satisfactory, not adequate, not timely enough by the victims. But the fact that auditors can report publicly on this reality to inform the kind of collective action also that Tyler was referring to, engagement, decision-making from stakeholders, customers, investors, insurers of these mine sites can also be a helpful lever to enable or improve access to remedy. The second point, IRMA audits, they require extensive engagement with rights holders, workers, and affected stakeholders before and during the on-site audits, independently from the mining company. This engagement has helped, in various cases, expose impacts and harm that were previously unacknowledged or unknown, complementing existing grievance mechanisms, either judicial or non-judicial, and in some cases it can help initiate remedy processes. Now, a major limitation, of course, and that's not new to you, IRMA, like all voluntary systems, we cannot impose legal sanctions. If a score is low or if remedy is not provided, we cannot suspend or revoke a permit. We cannot fine a company. If an audit reveals major human rights violations deliberately caused or contributed to by a mine site, yes, IRMA can disassociate. We can exclude the company from our system. But this is likely not going to stop the harm or to bring remedy and reparation to those who suffer. So IRMA has been working on a specific non-judicial remedy framework to address the situations, very much inspired by the work of FSC. This is work in progress, it's not fully funded, and it's challenging, but we're working on it. But again, this should not be the only way to protect and uphold fundamental rights, so just calling on governments again here. And then finally, the third feature is IRMA has its own grievance mechanism to receive and respond to complaints about the IRMA process, IRMA audits. We've received 6 formal complaints so far. You can find the details on our website. Some of them relate to inadequate or insufficient opportunities for people to participate in audits, and we've proposed ways to resolve them. But some complaints do challenge the conclusion of the audits regarding legal compliance or the lack of free, prior, and informed consent from affected Indigenous rights holders. And for those complaints that are about actual behavior and practice, we've also proposed measures, and we're watching this very closely. Some of them remain open until subsequent audits take place, so we'll see if this is acceptable. So in conclusion, I'll say that at IRMA we're learning a lot collectively through our multipartite governance model with a lot of humility, and we don't pretend to have perfect solutions. I repeat that states and governments have huge powers and responsibilities, that's why we also engage with them. But the 3 features I mentioned today, I think have really offered a platform for constructive engagement and dialogue between affected peoples and mining companies before, during, and after the audits. And I hope this will continue to help remedy harm and prevent harm from happening in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for sharing your insights as well. I mean, and I think this is a moment for us to really reflect on what you said, right? These are not systems that are meant to replace the role of the government as duty bearer. And it's also important to note, as both yourself and Tyler acknowledge, that corrective action plans and those types of actions taken as a result of the findings do not constitute remedy. And here, I think we need to shift to hearing what the experiences from the community perspective is like when it comes to remediation processes and your engagement with these certification systems or verification systems. So, Andiko, let me go over to you. Can you please share your insights as to what the opportunities and limitations are?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Before I'm going to the deep presentation, I would like to say sorry. I'm sorry because I will talking with English. This is not my mother tongue. Maybe so hard to understand. What my point? If you want to know deep, you can discuss with me after that. And second, not easy to talk in the front my professor in university. Because my professor coming as Indonesian representation. This is make me little bit nervous, yeah. Sorry, Prof. Nah, I have been I have been working with the issue more than 20 years, yeah. But from my experience, someday, if we're talking about some audit system, we will be lose our humanity inside the technicality of indicator. This is main point. After the audit process, the company lose his good relationship with the community. But the relationship after the audit, this is the some capital to bring forward the relationship in the future. Why? The first, commonly in the ground, yeah, the certification, the audit process will be coming in the unbalanced power. Why imbalance powers in the ground? The situation coming from the lack of, for example, yeah, the lack of recognition of indigenous people rights, for example. Can you imagine someone, the right holder, but under the formal system, living in the stakeholder? And the auditor only thinking this is stakeholder, not right holder, not so important. And sometimes the auditor lose the moment to talking deep in the indigenous people or local people because there is no enough recognition in the ground. And second, someday, if we're talking about, what is name? Yeah, this is common in the ground, yeah. The certification process coming within the situation of tenure conflict. The company has the all license from country, but the community only has the claim from his behind, yeah, the history about the area. And we have the big homework, how to bridging the different system about the tenure. And the certification process doesn't have idea much, yeah, maybe limitation, to engage and bring the right holder, informal right holder, to the process. What is the impact that? The certification sometimes losing the accountability. And I have two case example, yeah. I working with two cases in the ground, and I have seen the complaint to the complaint mechanism inside the certification system. And two cases, I got the confirmation there is some violation about the IPIC. Why? The certification not here about that for preliminary. Why should waiting me to go to the quote unquote, yeah, or like complicated complaint mechanism? I need 5 years to get to opportunity to make some directly negotiation with the company to define what is the true remedy for this process. And we got the big challenge. Why? If there is some process, the process was filed, the FPIC, what is the remedy about that? The community side he want to bring back the last situation. Because the principle of remedy, if you want to give some remedy, try to give the first situation. But not easy because the area already established the company here. And we need to make hard negotiation to define some intermediary justice here in the weakness situation. Yeah. But someday, someone asked me, what is the condition about the justice and the ground through the remediation? There is no formula here, only principle. But if you want to find some remedy, you need thinking more. But the last value here, how happy the parties about the remedy. And the happiness of parties in the remedy process will become a capital to develop of the new relationship. And commonly, after the conflict about remedy, the parties are going to go inside the new conflict because there is no quote-unquote happiness about the remedy. Now, from this situation, I try to develop some community monitoring as a tool to manage the community perception or expectation and how to make accountable, how to increase the accountability of standard and certification, I think, in the future. Because not easy to develop some true relationship among environment, social, and economic. In the future, if we're talking about the human rights due diligence, we're talking about how to bring the accountability in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andiko. I think we can all agree that that was heard loud and clear, and certainly one of the key points that I feel many in this room will agree with was that point about ensuring that we don't lose our humanity inside the technicality of indicators, as you said so eloquently just now. Now, in the interest of time, let me turn to Q&A, to opening the floor. Please put your hand up if you would like to ask a question or make a comment to our speakers. Yes. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much to the speakers, and we're one of the co-conveners of this event with the Right Energy Partnership with Indigenous Peoples, and one of those who also co-organized a global convening on the experience of Indigenous peoples on audit and certification schemes. Like you, Tyler, we're also so confused with all the terms that are being used, but we've looked at the different experiences across commodities. Now, it's important that when we look at certification and audit schemes, we also look at the systemic issues, because the failure of these schemes would also be rooted from the failure of states, for example, to recognize Indigenous peoples' rights to their land and resources, and also to self-determination and free, prior, and informed consent. So when we look at access to remedy in relation to audit and certification schemes, we need to look at the higher ground on the systemic issues. But what we'd also like to point out here in relation to access to remedy is also grievance mechanisms within the audit schemes. If there are concerns on audits that are being done, especially on free, prior, and informed consent, who the auditors are consulting with in relation to Indigenous peoples, because there are examples where they only consult with a group of Indigenous peoples PFAS identified by the company? What's the grievance, what's a remedial mechanism for communities to raise their concerns? There are particular questions that were raised by colleagues for FSC. Regarding the FSC remedy framework, partners in Indonesia report that baseline social assessments for app and April continue to violate indigenous people's rights to free, prior, and informed consent. Third-party assessors, some with prior links to these companies, are consulting with a few individuals off-site. And the communities have no information about FSC or the remedy framework. With these concerns about these practices, why has FSC not paused the implementation of these assessments in that particular case? And for IRMA, we understand that companies and in some cases states are pressuring the weakening of free, prior, and informed consent requirements. What steps is IRMA taking to ensure that the free, prior, and informed consent chapter within the IRMA standard is not diluted and that it upholds the right to self-determination of indigenous peoples?
Thank you for those questions. Okay. The distinguished delegate from Indonesia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Certification and verification system have become key tools to demonstrate responsible business conduct and strengthen supply chain accountability. Indonesia has vast experience in high-risk sectors, including palm oil and other natural resource industries, where certification has improved transparency and supported responsible market access. It is important to acknowledge a challenging truth. Certification has not always prevented human rights abuses or delivered justice to affected communities, just mentioned also by Mr. Andiko. Our national human rights monitoring indicate more than 9,500 complaints to the National Human Rights Commission and civil society mapping of over 2,100 incidents of corporate-related human rights abuse. Indonesia recognizes the value of certification, but also its structural limitation. Many schemes are voluntary and market-driven. Auditing quality is uneven, with abuses persisting despite labels. And grievance mechanisms are often legalistic, complex, and distant from communities. These challenges underscore a core principle. Certification cannot replace the role of the state. State must regulate it effectively and guarantee access to remedy, including legal enforceability and sanction when harm occurs. Indonesia is therefore developing a presidential regulation requiring mandatory human rights due diligence to close governance gap that certification alone cannot fill, and to anchor monitoring, auditing, and remedy in law, not only in private schemes. As we move forward, Indonesia highlights three priorities. First, certification must complement, not substitute, national regulation and international standards. Second, grievance and remedy system must be independent, culturally appropriate, and accessible. And third, capacity building should include businesses, auditors, and right holders. If certification is to support justice, it must evolve beyond checklists into mechanisms that enable remedy, accountability, and dignity. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Indonesia, and then we will go to, yes, please, take the floor.
Thank you. My name is Chiwike Okereke. I work with the African Law Foundation. AfriLaw is also a member of ZTI, Zero Tolerance Initiative. Last 2022, we did community-based research on palm oil supply chain in Nigeria, when we investigated a host community conflict with the biggest palm oil company in Nigeria. What we discovered from the data research is that the palm oil company has all the certifications you can think of. And we begin to understand that from our experience, especially the LSPO, the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, and other relevant ones, which were decorated in their website, we noticed that it is just for the business, because on the ground, with the communities and indigenous people, they don't even know what it's all about or what is provided for. So we questioned what the relevance of those certifications and audits and whatever it is, because it has no meaning to the communities. It doesn't, have any way to improve their situation and circumstances, and the conflicts and variations and all of them going on. So I very much appreciate the presentations, but we have to see how we localized and practicalize the outcomes of these processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I'll take the floor. We'll come 1, 2, 3, 4. If you can please keep your comments to 1.5 minutes, that would be greatly appreciated. We'll start with the person in front. The floor is yours, yes.
Thank you. I would like to make a question directly to ARMA, but IRMA, but I think it applies to all of the certification process, because I think the one challenge that we have now is that it's different to certify the location or certify the product, because some companies, they certify one operation or one site, and that doesn't mean that the final product comes from a certified place. So I would like to hear from you, how are you working with the supply chains, and how are you developing this so we can guarantee that the final product comes from a certified place that has this minimum standards? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We'll move to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman and the panelists. And I'm Tsujino from Nakashima Tsunematsu Law Firm in Japan. And as a lawyer, I always have fundamental question: how can we review corporate commitment to BHR as sufficient? And because doing HRDD is infinite journey, right? So no quantitative approach, and bad qualitative approach. So here's my question, based on the UNGPs, of course, and what specific and more concrete criteria can we rely on apart from regulations? And one more, and when it comes to certification, including remedy process, it might be more practical to give incentives to companies to acquire certification itself. And so what ways can we create, like giving good condition in procurement and incentive, investment, and so forth? Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. To the individual in the yellow hat, the floor is yours.
Muy buenas tardes a los panelistas. Saludar por su brillante participación, intervención. Mi nombre es Rolando Escobar, de la Amazonía peruana. Solamente yo quisiera hacer un comentario respecto a la intervención del representante de Colombia. Al mismo tiempo felicitar que las empresas palmicultores operan con certificación RCPO. Es saludable eso. A lo contrario, en Perú pues operan con toda impunidad. Desbosque, crimen ambiental, y después quieren buscar la aprobación de EIA, del estudio de impacto ambiental. Y es lamentable que vienen depredando territorios ancestrales de la población indígena. En ese sentido, pues, yo preocupado escucho pues, que en otras ciudades, otros países, pues, trabajan muy bien. Eso es saludable. No sé, desde el organismo internacional, qué tiene que haber, qué tiene que hacer respecto a eso. No solamente es eso, también es promueven divisionismo en las comunidades nativas. Ellos son los que ponen sus jefes de las comunidades, autoridad comunal. Y es más, ahora vienen promoviendo para la elección del gobierno del Estado peruano. Es muy lamentable. Muchas gracias.
Thank you for your comment. And then for the last question that we'll take, over to you.
So thank you, everyone. Listening to today's discussion, one issue seems to come back and again. We have certification and verification systems that can identify risks, that can flag abuses, that can give business a score. Yet when violations occur, nothing truly happens. A low score on its own does not protect a community, a worker, or a right holder. It signals harms, but it does not stop it. And this gap between identifying harm and actually providing remedy is where we collectively need to act. So I would like to take advantage on this space where states, businesses, civil society, leaders, and UN actors are all represented to make a very simple yet a very practical appeal. We need to start working and advocating toward embedding certifications and verification systems into legal and policy framework. Not to punish businesses, but to give these mechanisms real force and to make sure that when harm is detected, there is a concrete path to remedy. Right now, many of these systems remain voluntary. They depend on goodwill, and goodwill alone cannot guarantee justice for affected people, especially in context of conflicts, climate crisis, or extractions of transitions minerals. If we want certification to be meaningful, it must be connected to enforceable duties, clearly accountability, and accessible avenues of appeal or redress. I'm not asking for a perfect solution. I'm asking that we use this forum to build momentum, to coordinate advocacy, and to ensure that certifications evolves from a signal to a lever that actually leads to change on the ground. Maybe in a few years, because of conversations like this, we will no longer be discussing the limits of the system, but celebrating these impacts, and thank you.
Thank you for that comment. With that, let me turn back to our speakers to see who would like to start first in addressing those questions and comments that we've received. Paula, would you like to go first, please?
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos por sus intervenciones. Aunque hubo algunas preguntas que están dirigidas a algunos de mis colegas explícitamente, yo, digamos, para no detenerme una por una, creo que identifico un punto en común entre varias de las preguntas, en últimas buscando pues una solución, digamos, conjunta de cómo los mecanismos o sistemas de certificación o verificación pues pueden apuntar a contribuir de alguna manera pues a ese acceso a la justicia o ese acceso a reparación, pese a que creo que una de las conclusiones comunes que podemos derivar de este panel es justamente que pues no pueden suplir definitivamente el rol del Estado y pues que hay unos retos, digamos, bastante grandes en términos de acceso efectivo a reparación, entendiendo que pues este no es la principal labor que desarrollan, pero que sí pueden llegar a contribuir a ella de una forma u otra. En ese sentido, creo que hay dos mensajes tal vez clave en términos de identificar cuál es el rol de cada actor en los territorios. Yo creo que eso tiene que ser sí o sí un elemento que se deba tener en cuenta y en este caso pues los esquemas tienen que identificar cuál es su rol, en este caso pues no en los territorios precisamente, pero sí en esos procesos de certificación y verificación, es decir, si bien no pueden cumplir el rol de un Estado y por supuesto tampoco por el momento obligar a las empresas a adoptar sus recomendaciones frente a un diagnóstico específico, sí, digamos como lo han mencionado varios de mis colegas, tienen un rol en términos de recomendaciones en donde pues ya identificamos que hay digamos retos en torno a qué tan vinculantes son y ahí es donde creo que entra o es fundamental un poco ese rol de colaboración o ese papel de colaboración activa también con los estados, porque justamente el desarrollo, tenerlos en cuenta en el desarrollo, por ejemplo, de políticas públicas o hacerse presente inclusive en el desarrollo de políticas públicas, de desarrollos normativos, pues puede ayudar de alguna manera a vincularlos dentro de parte de esa solución para promover un poco ese acercamiento a pues que si bien no son voluntarias estas, no son vinculantes, estas recomendaciones siguen siendo esquemas voluntarios en muchos de estos casos, pues los estados también puedan adoptar de una forma u otra a través de distintos instrumentos esa estos mecanismos, estos sistemas como aliados. Y por otra parte, yo creo que un tema clave que no puede dejarse de lado en ninguno de estos procesos es la generación de confianza. Es decir, en últimas, estas auditorías, estos procesos de certificación, la verificación de estos estándares surgen en últimas y creo que tienen que apuntar en últimas a generar confianza. No solo en lo que están certificando, en lo que están auditando. En últimas, las empresas acuden a estos mecanismos que existen para generar un poco como esa confianza también entre los titulares de derecho. Entonces, tal vez sea un poco el verificar si de verdad se está generando confianza, si de verdad lo que se está certificando genera esa confianza en los titulares de derecho y si de verdad se están intentando acercar a las partes justo para que no perdure un conflicto del que de alguna manera se intenta dar una solución.
Thank you. Muchísimas gracias for that, Paula. Let me turn to you, Salem, given that there were a couple of questions for FSC.
Thank you, Chair. So some of the concerns that we've seen in the implementation of the remedy framework over the last few years has really been centered around rights holders and rights holders' level of information in order to meaningfully engage in a remedy process. It's one of the fundamental pillars of the FSC remedy framework is that the company stays accountable to the process, they stay accountable for the harms that they've committed, and that they stay accountable for the remediation of those harms through the remedy framework. The FSC does not stand in the middle and stand between the rights holder and the company, but rather the FSC stays at a position of facilitating the process as the standard setter, but that we do not interrupt that line of accountability. But something that we have observed, something that we have seen, something that we have that we are learning from, is that the company in and of itself is not able to fully provide all of the capacity building necessary on the ground in order to bring rights holders to a level of information that they can understand what is certification, what is FSC, what is remedy, what is a rights holder-centered approach, what is the UNGP. There's not a concept for this, and companies are struggling filling this role. And some rights holders do not want to receive this information from companies because the trust has been so broken over so many years that they don't trust the company to do this work. So this is where FSC is stepping in and creating this capacity building mechanism to support the capacity building, as the gentleman from Indonesia has also said, not only for rights holders, but also for businesses, for CSOs, for NGOs, for local governments, so that there's an understanding in the landscape what FSC is doing, what FSC is trying to achieve, and why these independent experts are coming to the ground and talking to people about remedy. So that's the first kind of learning area that I mentioned. I also just wanted to briefly say, I really appreciate your energy, the gentleman here that's looking to create a coalition around certification and government action in order to work on regulation to drive improvements in sustainable practices through society, through the work that we're doing here. Please apply to be an FSC member. We need that energy. We want you. I'll share the website with you. You are most welcome. And thank you for those questions. I will leave it there.
Thank you, Salem. Pierre?
Yeah, thanks. I'll be quick in the interest of time. I think I'll address maybe two of the questions that were directed to Irma. I think regarding the chapter on and the requirements we have around Indigenous people's rights and FPIC. So we're in the process of finalizing this 2.5-year public consultation process, as you know, and our multi-stakeholder board has committed to not lower the bar on any chapter to keep international law and jurisprudence as the minimum baseline. And we've received very substantial and detailed contribution from a number of Indigenous rights organizations, Indigenous leaders themselves, so I want to thank them. We're in the process of reviewing this, and you'll be informed very soon. About the sort of chain of custody, traceability from the mines of origin to the end products, what I can say is we have a chain of custody standard that we are piloting, And yes, our system is voluntary, but the vast, vast majority of sites that are undertaking audits are doing it because their customers are asking them to do it. They're putting in their sourcing contract that they need to do IRMA audits, direct and indirect customers. So all these downstream companies that are members of IRMA, many of them, are also very interested in that. So we're actively working on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those succinct responses, Pierre. Tyler, would you like to respond to any as well?
Sure, thank you. First of all, just to the gentleman who spoke last, I 100% agree, and that's why we advocate actually for governments to step in, or this working group, in fact, and develop more clear criteria on what, a number of things. What is the role of audits in effective due diligence? The UNGPs or the OECD guidelines doesn't really talk about it. It's kind of constructive ambiguity to get consensus, but now's the time. What is the best practice for audit management, audit governance, and audit quality control, including related to worker engagement, community engagement, stakeholder engagement? What are the best practices for remediation? And those are all areas that I think we need. And if we can legislate this or regulate this, develop these criteria, we can level up and drive that impact for everybody. So fully agree and sign on to that suggestion. We've been advocating that for a long time in law itself. Just to the last point on assessing and getting product guarantees for everything, I would just caution, I know that's the easy way to go, but I think there's a real risk in providing a guarantee that a certain product is free of certain risk. Supply chains, as we know, are incredibly complex. Once something leaves the mine, it often goes to one of the initiatives we oversee, the Responsible Minerals Initiative. We look at smelters and refiners that source from thousands of different mines and recyclers and doing thousands of transactions and commodity traders. There are usually 10 tiers between a refiner and an auto OEM. So it's almost impossible to provide a product level guarantee in some of these supply chains, but all we could do is hope that these risks are being identified and managed effectively. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on more than sort of guarantees of absence of risk.
I must say, Tyler, thank you for that, but also the constructive ambiguity and then side eye to the, I felt that. Let me now turn to you, Andiko. Would you like to respond to anything that you've heard so far?
Okay, maybe this is for my sister from Japan. As a lawyer, I have 3 glass. Yeah. The first, if we're talking about the human right implementation, including the business and human right, I still find some avoid. Yeah. Try to talk to the client, avoid that. If you can avoid that, you need to reduce the impact. Now, if you cannot reduce the impact, you should compensate the impact. This is talking about the remedy. But the remedy, not the end of process. How to manage the stakeholder engagement like that, yeah. And second, we already success to put the issue of indigenous people in the table of UN, yeah. But today, the time to know detail look like Indonesia, yeah. So many leveling indigenous people in Indonesia, including the level of right. Maybe someday you can meet with the indigenous people as an ethnic. The right within the cultural right. But the right of land maybe in the different level. This is what I have the experience in the ground, including the how to implement the model of audit. Yeah. Now the weakness is a few auditor doesn't have enough knowledge so deep about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Andiko. And before I turn to our special guest for this session, can you please first join me in thanking our speakers for their very insightful remarks? So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Hoi Mai, who is a representative of the communities in Odar Minche, Cambodia, communities that were forcibly evicted to make way for a sugar economic land concession between 2008 and 2009. Hers is a story of hope and perseverance, as Mai and her community recently reached a positive resolution with the Thai sugar producer after a 50-year campaign involving a groundbreaking class action, global advocacy, and NCP complaints. Although her community faced setbacks, including 2 unsuccessful attempts to use the grievance mechanism of a sugarcane certification system, they later turned to the NCP process under the OECD guidelines, which helped push the certification system to engage. Their determination ultimately resulted in a successful remedy through transboundary litigation, an outcome, however, that took 17 years to achieve. It is self-evident that a 17-year wait for remedy is untenable and raises important questions about what more businesses and multi-stakeholder initiatives can do to use their leverage for earlier, and what can be learned as well to ensure that no other community must wait over a decade for justice. But with that, I welcome Hoi Mai, as well as her interpreter, Saron Len, who is the Development Watch Manager at Equitable Cambodia. Hoi Mai, the floor is yours. Up to her. You can stand there or there.
First of all, I would like to say thank you, Chair, for giving opportunity for me to share and to be a part of this session. Yes, and good afternoon, everyone in this room. I am a victim of the sugar plantation in Cambodia. Yeah, that the government granted the concession to the company. So I am here, so I would like to deliver my message regarding to the investment. So for the stakeholder initiative is very important. So before that certify a company, they need to, they seriously assess the company's, its practices, including their engagement with the community, affected community. សិក្សាឲ្យបានច្បាស់លាស់ដោយសារផលប៉ះពាល់ការលំបាករបស់ប្រជាជនគឺប៉ះពាល់ទៅលើសិទ្ធិមនុស្សឲ្យគាត់សិក្សាឲ្យបានច្បាស់លាស់បានឲ្យគាត់នយោបាយទុនចា So yeah, you have to take a seriously assessment with the company because if you not do a serious assessment with the affected community, that is will violate to the community rights. ចាខ្ញុំសូមជូនសារទៅដល់អ្នកបញ្ជាទិញចាធ្វើម៉េចឲ្យលោកពិភាក្សាជាមួយដៃគូឲ្យបានល្អិតល្អន់កុំមានបញ្ហាជាមួយប្រជាពលរដ្ឋ So I would like to give a message as well about to the buyers, like before you buy the products, like sugar product, like from the company, you need to be seriously assessment. អ្នកបញ្ជាទិញគឺមានសារៈសំខាន់ណាស់ដោយសារគាត់ជាដៃគូជាមួយក្រុមហ៊ុនចាហើយសូមអោយលោកទាំងអស់សិក្សាឲ្យបានច្បាស់លាស់ហើយប្រភពសារគ្នាដើម្បីដោះស្រាយរោដំណោះស្រាយជាមួយប្រជាពលរដ្ឋសិនចា
Yeah, if the buyers really engage with the community or with the producer, so that is will be mitigate the risk for the communities.
តែបើមានប៉ះពាល់ហើយសូមលោកដោះស្រាយឲ្យប្រជាជនឲ្យចប់ចាដើម្បីប្រជាជនគ្នាអត់ចង់តវ៉ាជាមួយក្រុមហ៊ុនទេមិនមានបញ្ហាអីទេបើសិនតែដោះស្រាយបានចប់ចា
If the impacts to the local community happens, so I would like the company take any seriously to solve the problem for the affected community, and the remedy it should not be take long.
ទី2ខ្ញុំថាสนំពោដល់ខ្ញុំដល់អ្នកបញ្ជាទិញគឺសូមអោយដោះស្រាយការលំបាករបស់ប្រជាពលរដ្ឋចប់សពគ្រប់កុំអោយមានបញ្ហាទាំងអស់និយាយយ៉ាងណាទៅលោកគ្លិក
Yeah, sorry, because it's again. So that is, I just want to readdress that the company have to solve all the problem for the affected people because we are the poor and then we're living in the difficulty and we're living relying on the land. So that is why the company need to pay more attention to us.
តែបើដេញថាប៉ះពាល់ហើយកុំពន្យាពេលយូរចារបូតដល់10ឆ្នាំដល់17ឆ្នាំដោយពួកខ្ញុំគឺសូមអោយដោះស្រាយជាប្រញាប់ដើម្បីនឹងធ្វើការនយោបាយទុនទៀតចោះចា
So yeah, we really want the company to respect our rights and our livelihood. Yeah, because the resolution it's very important for us. So we don't want to have the issues happen take long years. So the resolution it should be short.
ខ្ញុំនឹងសង្ឃឹមថាតទៅមុខទៀតដែលខ្ញុំបានផ្ញើសារទៅក្រុមហ៊ុនហើយនឹងអ្នកបញ្ជាទិញលោកនឹងធ្វើការលោកនឹងគិតដើម្បីធ្វើការឲ្យល្អជាងនេះទៀតចាខ្ញុំសូមអរគុណ
I think the positive and the constructive engagement with the community is a key finding for timely resolution. And thank you very much for your pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hoimai, for reminding us yet again the importance of hearing the voices of affected communities and to ensuring that in all that we do in relation to advancing the business and human rights agenda, that we must put people and the planet at the center. With that, as I conclude this session, I would like to thank the co-organizers, the Office of the High Commissioner, Business and Human Rights Section, Right Energy Partnership with Indigenous Peoples, Asia Indigenous Peoples Network on Extractive Industries and Energy, or APNI, Forest Stewardship Council, Forest Peoples Program, and also with the additional contributions of Inclusive Development International and Equitable Cambodia. Thank you so much again for being part of this dialogue, and I very much hope that we can return to these issues again next year to hear more positive developments and to hear that we have finally been able to move the needle in relation to access to effective remedies. With that, thank you again, and thank you to our interpreters.